The crystal glass was halfway to his lips when she grabbed his wrist. Marco Santini froze. In his 32 years of life, 20 of them spent ruling the most feared crime family in New York. No one had ever dared touch him uninvited, especially not a waitress in a dying diner on the wrong side of Brooklyn. His bodyguards moved instantly, hands reaching for concealed weapons, but he raised his free hand slightly, stopping them cold. "Don't swallow, it's poisoned," she whispered. Her green eyes locked onto his with an intensity that sent electricity through his veins. Time seemed to suspend. The bustling noise of the diner faded into white noise. Marco studied her face, searching for deception, for fear, for anything that would explain why this woman, this stranger wearing a coffee-stained apron and yesterday's mascara, had just saved his life. "Explain," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Her hand trembled against his wrist, but she didn't let go. "Your business partner, Vincent. I saw him slip something into your drink when you went to the bathroom. I know who you are, Mr. Santini. I know what happens to people who cross you. But I couldn't just watch someone die right in front of me." Marco's jaw tightened. Vincent Marcello. His right hand for 8 years. The man he'd trusted with his life, his empire, his secrets. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. If you're already hooked by this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. He released the glass, letting it sit untouched on the scratched Formica table. His dark eyes never left her face. She was beautiful in that exhausted, working 3 jobs kind of way. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, freckles across her nose, lips that probably smiled more than they frowned despite the hardness life had clearly thrown at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma." "Emma Sullivan." She finally released his wrist, stepping back as reality seemed to crash down on her. Her face went pale. "Oh God, I just grabbed a Mafia boss. I'm going to die, aren't I?" Something unexpected happened then. Marco Santini, the man called the Reaper by his enemies, smiled. Not the cold, predatory smile he used in business, a real one. "No, Emma Sullivan, you're not going to die." He stood, his 6'3" frame towering over her 5'5". "You're going to live. And you're going to tell me everything you saw." His men surrounded Vincent's booth before the traitor even realized what was happening. Marco watched as his former friend's face drained of color, watched him try to run and fail, watched him realize his carefully planned assassination had crumbled because of a waitress with a conscience. "Take him to the warehouse," Marco ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'll deal with him personally." As his men dragged Vincent out through the kitchen entrance, Marco turned back to Emma. She stood frozen behind the counter, gripping a coffee pot like it might save her from whatever came next. "You work tonight?" he asked. Yes, until 11. "Not anymore. You're coming with me." "What? I can't just leave. I need this job. I have rent due and student loans and—" "How much do you make here?" Emma blinked. That's none of your business." Marco pulled out his wallet, extracted a stack of $100 bills and placed them on the counter. "That's $20,000. Consider it a thank you for saving my life. Now you're coming with me because Vincent had partners. If they find out you're the reason their plan failed, you're dead by morning." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. Emma looked at the money, then at him, then at the door where Vincent had disappeared. Her hands shook as she untied her apron. "I don't understand why you'd protect me." "Because you protected me first." Marco gestured toward the door. "And because I don't let good people die for doing the right thing." Emma grabbed the money with trembling fingers and stuffed it into her purse. She followed him out into the cold October night, her thin jacket offering little protection against the wind that whipped through the Brooklyn streets. A black Mercedes waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. Marco opened the back door for her. The gesture seemed strangely gentlemanly for a man whose reputation was built on violence and fear. Emma hesitated on the sidewalk, caught between the known misery of her life and the terrifying unknown of his world. "I promise you," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it. "No harm will come to you under my protection." Something in his eyes made her believe him. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was suicidal. But Emma Sullivan had been playing it safe her whole life, and where had it gotten her? Working double shifts for tips that barely covered groceries, living in a studio apartment with a broken heater, drowning in debt from a nursing degree she'd never finished. She got in the car. The interior smelled like expensive leather and cologne. Marco slid in beside her, and the door closed with a heavy final sound. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emma watched the diner disappear in the side mirror, her old life, fading into the distance. "Where are we going?" she asked. Somewhere safe. My estate in the Hamptons. He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I need to make some calls. Find out who else was involved in this betrayal. Emma studied his profile in the dim light from passing street lamps. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes that had seen too much darkness. But there was something else there too. Something she hadn't expected to find in a man like him. Loneliness. Bone-deep, soul-crushing loneliness. Thank you, he said suddenly, turning to meet her gaze. For what you did back there. Most people would have looked the other way. I'm a nurse. Or I was trying to be. Emma shrugged. I couldn't just let someone die, even if that someone scares half the city. I don't scare you. She considered lying, then decided against it. You terrify me, but you also just saved my life, so I figure we're even. Marco laughed, and the sound transformed his entire face. For a moment, he didn't look like the Reaper. He looked like a man who rarely had reasons to laugh. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours. Emma dozed off somewhere around hour 1, her head eventually coming to rest against Marco's shoulder. He didn't move her. Instead, he sat perfectly still, making his phone calls in whispered Italian, coordinating the dismantling of a conspiracy, while the exhausted waitress slept against him like he was someone safe. Emma woke to gentle shaking and the sound of waves crashing against a shore. We're here, Marco said. She sat up quickly, disoriented and embarrassed. I fell asleep on you. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You've had a long night. He opened the car door and offered his hand. Emma took it, stepping out onto a circular driveway made of white stone that gleamed in the moonlight. Before her stood a mansion that belonged in movies, not real life. 3 stories of classic architecture, lit windows glowing warm against the night sky, manicured gardens stretching as far as she could see. This is your house? One of them. Marco guided her up the front steps, where an older woman in a housekeeper's uniform waited in the doorway. Maria, this is Emma Sullivan. She's going to be staying with us for a while. She'll need the guest suite in the East Wing and everything she might need. Clothes, toiletries, anything. Maria nodded, her knowing eyes taking in Emma's worn jeans and cheap jacket without judgment. Of course, Mr. Santini. Welcome, Miss Sullivan. Let me show you to your room. Emma followed the housekeeper through halls lined with art that probably cost more than Emma would earn in a lifetime. The guest suite turned out to be larger than her entire apartment, decorated in soft blues and creams, with a 4-poster bed that looked like sleeping on a cloud. There's a bathroom through there, Maria gestured. I'll have some clothes brought up for you. Mr. Santini wants you to be comfortable. Thank you, Emma managed, still overwhelmed by the surreal turn her life had taken. Alone finally, she sank onto the edge of the bed and let reality crash over her. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been deciding whether to pay her electric bill or buy groceries. Now she was hiding from Mafia assassins in a Hamptons mansion, under the protection of the most dangerous man in New York. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. Come in, she called. Marco entered, changed now from his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. He carried a tray with tea and sandwiches. You haven't eaten, he said, setting the tray on the table by the window. Maria made these. She makes the best sandwiches on the East Coast. Emma's stomach growled traitorously. She joined him at the table, biting into a sandwich that tasted like heaven after her usual diet of ramen and coffee. So, she said between bites, what happens now? Marco leaned back in his chair, watching her with those intense dark eyes. Now I hunt down everyone involved in tonight's attempt on my life. It won't be pretty, and it won't be quick. You'll stay here until it's safe. That could be weeks, months. It could be. Emma set down her sandwich. I can't just hide here forever. I have a life, Mr. Santini. Marco. Call me Marco. He poured tea into delicate china cups. And do you? Have a life worth going back to? The question stung because it was true. What life did she have? Dead-end jobs, mounting debt, a studio apartment she could barely afford, no family, no real friends? That's not fair, she said quietly. No, it's not. I'm sorry. Marco ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly tired. I have a proposition for you. Hear me out before you say no. Emma wrapped her hands around the warm teacup. I'm listening. You saved my life tonight. In my world, that creates a debt. A serious one. He leaned forward. Work for me. Not in the business. Nothing illegal. I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't part of this world. Someone who sees me as a human being, not just the Reaper. Work for you doing what? Whatever you want. I have legitimate businesses. Real estate, restaurants, import-export companies. You could manage one of my properties, work in my charity foundation, go back to school, and I'll pay for it. Whatever you need. Emma stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you risked everything to save a stranger. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me without fear or greed in their eyes. Because, he paused, vulnerability flickering across his face. Because I'm tired of being alone. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Emma saw past the dangerous reputation, past the expensive clothes and the deadly power. She saw a man who'd built walls so high he'd trapped himself inside them. I don't know anything about your world, she said softly. Good. Maybe you can remind me what it's like to be human. Emma should have said no. Should have demanded he take her home, should have run from this dangerous man and his dangerous world. But something in his eyes stopped her. Something that matched the loneliness in her own heart. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll stay. For now. Marco's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Thank you, Emma. They talked until dawn, trading stories like currency. He told her about growing up in his father's shadow, inheriting an empire he'd never wanted, losing his mother to cancer when he was 16. She told him about her own losses, her father's gambling debts, her mother's early death, the nursing school dreams that had crumbled under financial reality. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Emma realized she'd never felt more awake, more alive, more seen than in this moment with this impossible man. Get some rest, Marco said finally, standing. Tonight, I have business to handle. Vincent needs to answer for his betrayal. The reminder of violence jolted Emma back to reality. What will you do to him? What needs to be done? His face hardened. He tried to kill me, Emma. In my world, that has consequences. Will you kill him? Marco met her eyes. Would you think less of me if I said yes? Emma considered. By any moral standard, she should be horrified. But Vincent had tried to murder Marco, had been willing to poison him in cold blood, and Marco had shown her nothing but protection and unexpected kindness. I think, she said carefully, that your world has different rules than mine. I won't judge you for following them. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or relief that she wasn't naive enough to demand he be something he wasn't. You're extraordinary, Emma Sullivan. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sweet dreams. After he left, Emma crawled into the cloud-like bed and fell asleep, thinking about dark eyes and dangerous smiles, and the terrifying, exhilarating feeling that her life had just changed forever. Emma woke to afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she forgot where she was, reaching for the alarm clock that wasn't there, the familiar water stain on her ceiling replaced by crown molding and a crystal chandelier. Reality crashed back. The diner. The poisoned drink. Marco Santini. She sat up, finding a silver tray on the bedside table with fresh coffee, pastries that looked bakery-made, and a small white card in masculine handwriting. Take your time. Maria will help you with anything you need. M. After showering in a bathroom larger than her old kitchen, Emma found a wardrobe full of clothes in her exact size. Jeans that actually fit, soft sweaters, comfortable shoes. Either Marco was very good at guessing, or he'd had someone research her overnight. Both options were slightly terrifying. She dressed in dark jeans and a cream sweater, then ventured out to explore. The estate was even more impressive in daylight. Marble floors, original artwork, rooms that seemed to stretch forever. She found Maria in a sunlit kitchen that belonged in a cooking magazine, kneading dough with practiced hands. Good morning, Miss Sullivan. Or should I say good afternoon? Maria smiled warmly. Coffee? Please, and call me Emma. She accepted a steaming mug. Is Marco around? Maria's expression shuddered slightly. Mr. Santini had business in the city. He'll be back tonight. Business. Emma remembered his words about Vincent, about consequences. Somewhere in New York right now, Marco was doing things she probably didn't want to imagine. The thought should have disgusted her. Instead, she felt a strange mixture of concern and curiosity. Maria, how long have you worked for Marco? 23 years. I was his mother's housekeeper first. The older woman's voice softened. He was just a boy when I met him. Too young to carry the weight his father put on his shoulders. What was his mother like? Isabella? Beautiful, inside and out. She tried to keep Marco innocent as long as possible, tried to give him a normal childhood despite... Maria gestured vaguely, encompassing the whole dark world Marco belonged to. She made him promise to always remember his humanity, to never become the monster people expected him to be. Emma sipped her coffee, pieces clicking together. He still keeps that promise, doesn't he? As best he can in his world. You'll see. Maria returned to her dough. He's different with you already, lighter. I haven't seen him smile genuinely in years until last night. The words warmed Emma more than they should have. She'd known Marco less than 24 hours, but already there was something between them. Something dangerous and magnetic and impossible to ignore. She spent the afternoon exploring the grounds. The estate had gardens that could swallow city blocks, a private beach, even a greenhouse full of orchids. Emma found herself in the library eventually, surrounded by thousands of books, and lost herself in a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, until footsteps in the doorway made her look up. Marco stood watching her, still dressed in dark clothes, his face unreadable. But there was something different about him now. A tension in his shoulders, shadows in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You're back," Emma said, closing the book. "I am." He crossed to the bar cart, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey. "Did you sleep well?" "Like the dead." She winced at her own word choice. "Sorry, poor phrasing." Marco's laugh was hollow. Appropriate, actually. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. "Vincent talked, gave up his co-conspirators. There were 5 others involved in the plot to kill me." "Were?" "Past tense, yes." He poured another drink. "They won't be a threat anymore." Emma set down her book and approached him slowly. "Are you okay?" "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you just killed 6 men. That has to affect you somehow." Marco's facade cracked slightly. "They betrayed me. Tried to murder me. They deserved what they got. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm asking if you're okay." He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "No one ever asks me that." "Well, I am." Something broke in his expression. He set down his glass and ran both hands through his hair. "No, Emma. I'm not okay. I'm never okay after nights like this. I see my mother's face, hear her voice telling me not to become a monster, and then I look at my hands and see blood, and I wonder if I already am one." Emma closed the distance between them, taking those blood-stained hands in hers. They were surprisingly warm, surprisingly gentle despite what they'd done. "You're not a monster, Marco. How can you say that? You don't know what I've done. I know you protected me when you didn't have to. I know you kept your mother's promise as best you could. I know you hate the violence even as you carry it out." She squeezed his hands. "Monsters don't question themselves. They don't feel regret." Marco pulled her closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, Emma's hand still holding his. "You're going to ruin me," he whispered. "Going to make me want things I can't have. A normal life, peace. Someone who sees past the blood. Maybe that's not such a bad thing." He kissed her then, sudden and desperate like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Emma should have pulled away, should have remembered this was insane. But his lips tasted like whiskey and regret and something sweeter underneath, and she found herself kissing him back with equal desperation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his hands on either side of her face. "This is a terrible idea." "The worst," Emma agreed. "You should run from me, from this life, from everything I represent. Probably. But you're not going to, are you?" Emma smiled, despite everything. "No, I don't think I am." Marco kissed her again, slower this time, tender in a way that made her heart ache. This man, this dangerous, broken man, was kissing her like she was something precious, like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured against her lips. "Just be here. I don't want to be alone with the ghosts." So Emma stayed. They ate dinner on the terrace overlooking the ocean, Maria serving pasta that tasted like love itself. They talked about everything and nothing, avoiding the heavy subjects in favor of discovering each other's favorite movies, childhood dreams, small silly things that felt enormous in their intimacy. As night fell, Marco took her hand and led her through the gardens, pointing out constellations, telling her stories his mother had told him about the stars. Emma leaned against him, breathing in his cologne, feeling safer than she had in years despite the absurdity of finding safety in the arms of a mafia boss. "Thank you," Marco said as they stood under the stars. "For what?" "For seeing me. The real me. Underneath everything else." He turned to face her, moonlight catching in his dark eyes. "I know this is crazy. I know we barely know each other. But Emma, I feel more alive with you than I have in a decade." "I feel it too," she admitted. "It terrifies me." "Good. Fear means you're smart enough to understand the danger." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But are you brave enough to stay anyway?" Emma thought about her old life, the loneliness and struggle and quiet desperation. Then she looked at Marco, this complicated man who killed without hesitation, but kissed with devastating gentleness. This shouldn't work. By every logical measure, this was disaster waiting to happen. But when had Emma's life ever been logical? Yes, she said. I'm brave enough. Marco smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the shadows in his eyes lightened. Then let's be brave together. He kissed her under the stars, while waves crashed against the shore, and Emma felt the last of her resistance crumble. She was falling for him, this impossible man in this impossible situation, and terrifying as it was, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. 3 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. Emma lived in the estate like a princess in a tower, protected and pampered but increasingly restless. Marco came and went on business, sometimes returning with shadows in his eyes, sometimes with rare smiles just for her. They fell into a rhythm. Breakfast together when he was home, long conversations over coffee. He taught her to speak basic Italian, laughing at her pronunciation. She made him watch romantic comedies he pretended to hate, but secretly loved. They kissed in the library, on the beach, against the kitchen counter when Maria wasn't looking. But they never went further, never crossed that final line. Marco held back like he was afraid one more step would shatter whatever fragile thing was growing between them. I have to go into the city today, Marco said one morning in early November. Come with me. Emma looked up from her eggs, surprised. Into the city? But you said it wasn't safe. My men have neutralized the remaining threats. It's safe now. Besides, he reached across the table, taking her hand. I want to show you my world. The real parts of it, not just the violence. 2 hours later, Emma sat in the Mercedes watching New York blur past the windows. Marco sat beside her, unusually quiet, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. They stopped first at a restaurant in Little Italy, a place called Isabella's, with faded awnings and checkered tablecloths. An elderly man emerged from the kitchen, his face lighting up when he saw Marco. Marco! Finalmente! He embraced Marco like a son, then noticed Emma. And who is this beautiful girl? This is Emma. Emma, meet Giuseppe. He was my mother's best friend. Giuseppe insisted on feeding them, bringing out plate after plate of homemade pasta, telling stories about Isabella Santini and the young boy Marco had been. Emma watched Marco's face soften as he listened, saw the person he might have been in a different life. Your mother, Giuseppe said seriously, she would have loved Emma. She always said you needed someone with a good heart to balance the darkness. After lunch, Marco took Emma to a youth center in Brooklyn, a renovated warehouse full of kids playing basketball and doing homework. A woman in her 50s approached, hugging Marco tightly. Kids, Mr. Santini is here. A dozen children swarmed them, shouting greetings, showing off drawings and test scores. Marco knew every name, asked about siblings and pets and favorite subjects. He wasn't the Reaper here. He was just Marco, the man who'd built this place, who funded their scholarships and after-school programs. You do this? Emma asked, watching him help a little girl with her math homework. My mother started it. I just keep it running. He looked up at her. These kids deserve better than what they were born into. Someone should give them a chance. Emma felt something crack open in her chest. This man, this supposedly cold-blooded killer, was gently explaining fractions to an 8-year-old girl with juice stains on her shirt. Their last stop was a cemetery in Queens. Marco led Emma to a simple marble headstone engraved with Isabella Maria Santini, beloved mother, taken too soon. He knelt, placing fresh white roses on the grave. Hi, Mama. I brought someone to meet you. Someone special. Emma's eyes stung with tears. She knelt beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. I think I'm in love with her, Marco continued, his voice rough. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But she makes me remember who I wanted to be. Who you wanted me to be. He touched the marble gently. I hope I'm making you proud. I hope I haven't strayed too far from your lessons. Emma couldn't help it. She turned his face toward her and kissed him, tasting salt and sadness and something achingly sweet. She'd be proud of you, Emma whispered. How could she not be? On the drive back to the Hamptons, Marco held her close in the back seat. Thank you for today, for seeing all of me. Thank you for showing me. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. I understand now why you do what you do. You're trying to protect the good things in a bad world. Does that make it better? Does that excuse the violence? Maybe not excuse, but it makes you human. Complicated. Real. She tilted her head up to look at him. I told you before, Marco. You're not a monster. Monsters don't build youth centers or visit their mother's grave or worry about whether they're still the person she wanted them to be. Marco kissed the top of her head. "What am I going to do with you, Emma Sullivan? Love me, if you meant what you told your mother." He went very still. "You heard that?" "I did." "And?" Emma's heart hammered in her chest. This was the moment, the precipice. Once she stepped off, there was no going back to safe ground. "And I think I'm falling in love with you too," she said. "Even though it's insane. Even though we've only known each other a few weeks. Even though your world terrifies me. I can't seem to help it." Marco made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her into his lap, holding her like she might disappear. "Say it again. I'm falling in love with you, Marco Santini." He kissed her then like the world was ending, deep and claiming and tender all at once. Emma melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. "When we get home," he murmured against her lips, "I'm going to make love to you, show you exactly how much you mean to me. Is that okay?" "More than okay," Emma breathed. The drive back seemed to take forever and no time at all. They stumbled through the estate's doors, mouths fused together, hands grabbing and pulling and exploring. Maria appeared in the hall, took one look at them, and smiled knowingly before disappearing. Marco's bedroom was all dark wood and masculine elegance, but Emma barely noticed. He laid her down on the bed with a reverence that made her throat tight, kissing every inch of exposed skin like she was sacred. "Tell me if you want to stop," he said, hovering over her. "Tell me if this is too much, too fast." Emma pulled him down to her. "The only thing that would be too much is if you stopped now." They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, whispered endearments mixing with soft gasps and sighs. Marco touched her like she was precious china, like she might break, until Emma demanded more, harder, deeper. Then he gave her everything, his control fracturing into raw need. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied, Emma's head on Marco's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. "I love you," he said into the comfortable silence. "I know it's crazy. I know it's too soon. But Emma, I love you. I love you too." She tilted her head up to kiss his jaw. "My dangerous, complicated, impossible man." Marco smiled against her hair. "What are we doing? Falling in love like this? Something crazy. Something right." Emma snuggled closer. "Something that feels like coming home." He tightened his arms around her, and for the first time in years, Marco Santini felt peace. Not the temporary calm between storms, but real peace. The kind his mother had always wanted for him. Outside, the ocean crashed against the shore. Inside, two broken people held each other and dared to believe in second chances. Emma woke to an empty bed and muffled voices downstairs. Morning light filtered through the curtains, and for a moment, she luxuriated in the memory of the night before. Her body ached in the best way, marked by Marco's gentle claiming. She dressed quickly in one of his shirts, following the voices to Marco's study. The door was slightly ajar, and she paused when she heard the anger in his tone. "I don't care what Dimitri wants. The answer is no. Boss, he's insistent. Says if you don't meet with him, there will be consequences." That was Tony, one of Marco's lieutenants. "Let him threaten. I won't compromise my principles, not even for peace with the Russians." Emma knocked softly, pushing the door open. 4 men stood around Marco's desk, all turning to stare at her. Marco's expression softened immediately. "Emma, you're awake." He dismissed his men with a gesture. "We'll continue this later." When they were alone, Emma crossed to him. "Trouble?" "Nothing I can't handle." He pulled her onto his lap, burying his face in her neck. "Dmitry Volkov, head of the Russian operations in New York, wants to meet. He's been pushing into my territory, trying to force a partnership. And you don't want to partner with him? He traffics women, Emma. Young girls from Eastern Europe, promised jobs and futures, then enslaved." Marco's voice hardened. "That's a line I won't cross. My family has never dealt in human lives." Emma understood then. Marco's world had rules, twisted as they might be. He dealt in protection, in illegal gambling, in things she didn't want to know about, but he had boundaries, principles he wouldn't violate. "What will you do?" "Meet with him. Make it clear that if he continues, we'll have war." He touched her face gently. "This is the part of my life I wanted to shield you from. I know what you are, Marco. You don't have to hide it. But I want to. When I'm with you, I want to be just a man in love, not the Reaper." Emma kissed him softly. "You're both, and I love both." The meeting with Dmitri was set for that evening at a neutral location, a warehouse owned by one of the Irish families. Marco tried to convince Emma to stay at the estate, but she refused. If this is your life, I want to understand it. Let me come. It could be dangerous. Everything about loving you is dangerous. Let me be there. So Emma found herself in the Mercedes again, this time with 4 armed guards and Marco tense beside her. The warehouse was cold and industrial, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Men with guns stood at every entrance. Dmitry Volkov was younger than Emma expected, maybe 40, with pale eyes and a smile that never reached them. He sat at a metal table with his own guards flanking him. Marco Santini, I've heard so much about the Reaper. His English carried a heavy accent. And you brought your pretty waitress. How domestic. Emma felt Marco tense, his hand tightening on hers under the table. Let's skip the pleasantries, Dmitry. I'm not interested in your partnership. That's unfortunate. Together, we could control all of New York. At what cost? You want me to look the other way while you destroy lives. I won't do it. Dmitry's smile sharpened. Such moral high ground for a man who's killed dozens. Tell me, does your waitress know how many men you've murdered? Does she know about the rival family you wiped out 5 years ago? Women and children included? Emma's blood ran cold. Marco's face went blank, carefully controlled. That's a lie. Is it? Ask him, pretty waitress. Ask him about the Moretti family. About little Sophia Moretti, age 6, found with a bullet in her head. Enough. Marco stood, his voice deadly quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You want to play the righteous crime lord, but your hands are just as bloody as mine. Marco looked like he might kill Dmitry right there. Emma touched his arm, feeling him vibrate with rage. Let's go. The ride back to the estate was silent. Marco stared out the window, his jaw clenched, refusing to meet Emma's eyes. She wanted to ask, wanted to demand the truth, but fear kept her quiet. Back at the mansion, Marco headed straight for his study, grabbing a bottle of whiskey. Emma followed, closing the door behind them. Tell me the truth, about the Morettis. Marco downed his whiskey, then poured another. You want the truth? Fine. The Moretti family tried to kill me, bombed my car. My driver died, 2 innocent bystanders. So yes, I retaliated. I sent my men to take out the entire family. And the little girl? Sophia. His voice cracked. She wasn't supposed to be there. The intelligence said she was at her grandmother's, but she'd come home sick from school that day. My men, they didn't know. They went in shooting, and when it was over, she was dead. Emma felt sick. This was real now, not abstract violence, but the death of a child. I see her every night, Marco continued, staring at his glass. Her face, her eyes, she'd be 13 now, would have had her whole life ahead of her. Instead, she's dead because of me. Did you kill her yourself? Does it matter? I gave the order. Her blood is on my hands regardless. Emma didn't know what to say. She'd known Marco was dangerous, known he'd killed people. But this was different. This was a child. Say something, Marco demanded. Yell at me. Tell me I'm a monster. Tell me Dmitry was right. I don't know what to say. Then let me say it for you. I'm exactly what you feared. A killer. A man with so much blood on his hands that no amount of good deeds can wash them clean. You should leave, Emma. Get as far from me as possible. Emma's mind raced. She should leave, should run from this man and never look back. But she remembered Giuseppe's stories. The kids at the youth center. Marco kneeling at his mother's grave. She remembered the way he touched her, the vulnerability in his eyes, the weight of guilt he carried. Did you mourn her? Emma asked quietly. Marco looked up, surprised by the question. Every day. I set up a trust fund for her surviving relatives. I visit her grave on her birthday. His voice broke. I named the youth center after her. Sophia's place. So maybe some good could come from something so terrible. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. You're not a monster, Marco. How can you say that? Because monsters don't mourn. They don't carry guilt. They don't try to make amends. She crossed to him, taking the glass from his hands. What happened to Sophia was tragic and terrible. But it was also an accident in a war you didn't start. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. But it also doesn't negate everything else about you. Emma cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. You're a man who made a terrible mistake and has been trying to atone for it ever since. That's not a monster. That's a human being. Marco pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I don't deserve you. Maybe not, but I'm staying anyway. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the weight of the past pressed down on them both. Emma knew this changed things, knew she could never again ignore the full reality of Marco's world. But she also knew she loved him, blood-stained hands and guilty conscience and all. I need you to understand something, Marco said finally. This life, my world, it will always demand things from me. I will always have blood on my hands. If you stay, you'll have to live with that. I know. And you can handle it? Emma pulled back to look at him. I don't know, but I want to try. For you. For us. Marco kissed her then, desperate and claiming, like he needed to prove she was real, that she was still his despite everything. Emma kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her complicated love into the connection of their lips. I love you, he gasped between kisses. God help me. I love you so much. I love you too. All of you. Even the broken parts. They made love on the couch in his study, urgent and raw, both needing the physical connection to ground them. Afterward, Marco held Emma close, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Dmitri won't let this go, he said quietly. He'll push until we go to war. Then we'll face it together. Marco kissed her forehead. Together. I like the sound of that. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Atlantic. Inside, two lovers held each other and tried to forget, just for a moment, the blood and violence that would always shadow their love. The war with Dmitri started 3 days later with a bomb in one of Marco's restaurants. Emma was at the estate when she heard, watching the news report of the explosion in Little Italy, Giuseppe's place reduced to rubble. Her heart stopped. Marco had been supposed to meet Giuseppe there that afternoon. She called his phone frantically, relief flooding through her when he answered. I'm okay. I was running late, thank God. His voice was tight with fury. Giuseppe is in the hospital. 3rd-degree burns, but he'll survive. Marco, I'm so sorry. This is war now. Dmitri made his move. Now I make mine. Emma heard the change in his voice. The Reaper was emerging, cold and calculating. Come home. Please. I can't. Not yet. Stay inside the estate. Double security is already on its way. The line went dead. Emma spent the next 12 hours pacing, watching news reports of escalating violence across New York. A Russian gambling den burned to the ground. 2 of Dmitri's lieutenants found dead in their cars. Marco's people striking back with precision and fury. Marco finally returned after midnight, covered in soot and smelling like smoke. Emma ran to him, checking for injuries, relief and anger warring in her chest. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. He held her face in his dirty hands. I'm sorry I scared you. What happens now? Now? Now I finish this before more innocent people get hurt. Over the next week, Emma watched Marco transform into someone else. Still loving with her, still tender in their private moments, but cold and ruthless when dealing with the war. He barely slept, coordinating strikes, moving pieces on a chessboard only he could see. The violence escalated. More bombs, more shootings, the city caught in the crossfire. Emma felt helpless, watching the news, knowing Marco was out there in the midst of it all. She found distraction in the youth center, volunteering to help with the kids. If she couldn't stop the violence, at least she could do something positive. The children loved her, especially little Maria, a 9-year-old girl with Sophia's dark hair and bright smile. Miss Emma, will Mr. Marco come visit soon? Maria asked one afternoon. He's very busy right now, sweetheart. Because of the bad men on TV? Emma's heart clenched. These kids weren't naive. They understood the world they lived in. Yes, because of the bad men. My brother says Mr. Marco is a bad man too. Emma knelt down to Maria's level. Mr. Marco does things to protect people. Sometimes those things seem bad, but he has a good heart. Don't ever doubt that. That night, Marco came home with blood on his shirt. Not his own, he assured her, but Emma's hands still shook as she helped him undress, as she ran a bath and washed the evidence of violence from his skin. 3 more of Dmitri's men are dead, he said flatly. We're winning, but the cost? Too high? Always too high. He pulled Emma into the bathtub with him, fully clothed, just needing her close. I saw a kid today. Couldn't have been more than 12. Standing on a corner, watching our convoy pass, and he looked at me with such hate. Like I was the devil himself. Maybe to him you are. Marco flinched. Is that how you see me now? No. I see a man trying to protect what's his, trying to stop a monster who's worse than he'll ever be. She kissed his jaw. But I also see a man being consumed by violence. When does it end, Marco? When Dmitri is dead or gone. There's no other way. The climax came 2 weeks later. Intelligence suggested Dmitri was planning something big, a strike meant to end the war decisively. Marco's people worked around the clock to discover the target. Emma was at the youth center when Tony burst through the doors, gun drawn. We need to go, Now. What's happening? Dimitri knows about this place. Knows Marco cares about it. He's coming here. Emma's blood ran cold. The children... We're evacuating everyone. Move! Chaos erupted. Emma helped herd terrified kids toward the back exits, her heart pounding. Little Maria clung to her hand, crying. I'm scared, Miss Emma. I know, sweetheart, but we're getting out of here. They'd almost reached the exit when the front windows exploded inward. Men in black tactical gear poured through, weapons raised. Tony and Marco's other guards opened fire, and Emma threw herself over Maria, covering the little girl with her body. Gunfire echoed in the enclosed space. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, praying for mercy, for protection, for Marco to somehow know she needed him. Then more gunfire, different weapons, and Marco's voice, shouting orders. Emma risked a look, seeing him leading a team through the smoke, taking down Dimitri's men with lethal precision. In 3 minutes, it was over. Dimitri's men were dead or fleeing. Marco found Emma and Maria huddled behind an overturned table, both unharmed but shaking. Thank God. He pulled them both into his arms. Thank God you're safe. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Marco's men were already disappearing, but he stayed, holding Emma and Maria until the little girl's mother arrived, sobbing with relief. After everyone was evacuated and statements given to sympathetic cops on Marco's payroll, he and Emma sat alone in the damaged center. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He tried to kill children, she whispered. He was willing to murder innocent kids to get to you. I know. And that's why this ends tonight. Marco's face was carved from stone. Dimitri crossed every line. He's done. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the start? I'm going to kill him myself. Emma grabbed his hand. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. Marco, please. I need to see this through. I need to understand fully what your justice looks like. He studied her face for a long moment. This isn't a game, Emma. What I'm about to do will haunt you. Then let it haunt me. But don't shut me out. Not anymore. Finally, Marco nodded. Okay, but you stay in the car. No matter what happens, you stay in the car. The warehouse where they'd first met Dimitri was burning when they arrived. Marco's men had struck first, killing Dimitri's guards, trapping him inside. Through the smoke, Emma could see Dimitri tied to a chair, beaten and bloody but conscious. Marco approached him slowly, pulling out his gun. Emma watched from the car, her heart in her throat. You tried to kill children, Marco said, his voice carrying in the night air. Innocent children. There's no coming back from that. You're no better, Dimitri spat blood. You killed Sofia Moretti. Yes, I did, and I carry that guilt every day. But there's a difference between a tragic accident and deliberately targeting children. You knew they were there. You wanted to hurt them to hurt me. In war, there are no innocents. Wrong. In war, the innocent are all that matter. Marco pressed the gun to Dimitri's forehead. You don't deserve a quick death, but I'm not a monster like you, so I'll make this fast. He pulled the trigger. Dimitri slumped forward, dead before he hit the ground. Marco stood there for a moment, gun still raised, his shoulders rigid. Then he lowered the weapon and walked back to the car, his face carefully blank. Emma met him at the door, pulling him into her arms. He shook against her, the adrenaline and emotion finally breaking through his control. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. For now, there will always be another Dimitri, another threat, another war. Then we'll face them together, one at a time. Marco pulled back to look at her. You still want to stay? After everything you've seen? Emma thought about Sofia, about little Maria crying in her arms, about Giuseppe's burns and the blood on Marco's hands. She thought about the man who'd held her through nightmares, who'd built a youth center to atone for his sins, who carried the weight of every life he'd taken. Yes, she said simply. I still want to stay. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful, tasting like smoke and salt and relief. I don't deserve you, Emma Sullivan. No, you probably don't. But you have me anyway. They drove back to the estate as dawn broke over the city. Two people bound together by love and violence and choices that could never be unmade. It wasn't a fairy tale. It would never be simple or clean. But it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. 3 months after Dimitri's death, Emma stood in the rebuilt youth center watching children play. The renovations had taken weeks, but the place was better than before. Safer, with reinforced walls and advanced security systems. Marco appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist. You've done an amazing job with this place. We did it together. Emma leaned into him. The kids love the new computer lab. Good. They should have every advantage. He kissed her temple. I have something to show you. He led her to his car, driving them to a neighborhood Emma didn't recognize. Tree-lined streets, Victorian houses with wraparound porches, a park where couples walked hand in hand. Where are we? She asked. Brooklyn Heights, one of the few neighborhoods I don't control. He parked in front of a beautiful brownstone. Come on. Inside, the house was stunning. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, a kitchen that would make Maria weep with joy. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, each filled with afternoon sunlight. Marco, whose house is this? He turned to her, suddenly nervous. It could be ours, if you want it. Emma's breath caught. What? I bought it. For us. For a life that's normal. As normal as we can be. He took her hands. I know the estate is beautiful, but it's my father's place. My family's place. This could be ours. A fresh start. Tears filled Emma's eyes. You'd leave the estate? I'd do anything for you. Besides, Maria has been making pointed comments about wanting to retire. She deserves peace, not managing a crime lord's household. Emma laughed through her tears. Are you asking me to move in with you, Mr. Santini? Actually, Marco dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I'm asking you to marry me. Emma's heart stopped. Inside the box was a ring, simple and elegant. A single diamond that caught the light. I know it's fast. I know my world is dangerous and complicated and will never have a completely normal life. But Emma, you're my everything. You make me want to be better, do better. You see the man I was supposed to be, not just the monster I became. Marry me. Build a life with me. Let me spend every day trying to deserve you. Emma was crying for real now, happy tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Marco slipped the ring onto her finger, then swept her into his arms, spinning her around the empty living room. You've made me the happiest man alive. Even though I come with no family, no dowry, nothing but student debt and a nursing degree I never finished, you come with a heart big enough to love a broken man like me. That's worth more than anything. He set her down gently. And speaking of that nursing degree, I have another surprise. He handed her an envelope. Inside was an acceptance letter to Columbia's nursing program, along with a scholarship covering full tuition. Marco, I can't accept this. It's not from me. Well, it is, but it's through the Isabella Santini Foundation. She always believed in education, in giving people second chances. Let me give you yours. Emma threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by love and gratitude, and the sheer impossibility of how her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling waitress with no hope, no future. Now she was engaged to a man who saw her, truly saw her, who wanted to build a life together. When do you want to get married? She asked. Tomorrow, next week, whenever you want. Just not too long from now. I've waited my whole life for you, Emma. I don't want to wait anymore. They set the date for spring, a small ceremony in the garden of their new home. Over the next months, Emma juggled nursing school, wedding planning, and settling into their life in Brooklyn Heights. True to his word, Marco tried to separate his business from their home. He kept an office downtown for his meetings, came home at reasonable hours, took Emma to dinner and movies like a normal couple. The violence still existed, the danger still lurked, but he shielded her from the worst of it. Emma thrived in nursing school, discovering a passion for pediatric care. She did clinical rotations at Children's Hospital, coming home with stories about the kids she'd helped, the lives she'd touched. Marco listened intently, proud of the woman she was becoming. You're glowing, he said one night as they cooked dinner together. School is good for you. It feels right. Like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do. Emma stirred the pasta sauce. I've been thinking about specializing in trauma pediatrics. Because of Sophia? Partly. And because of all the kids at the center who've seen too much, experienced too much violence. They need advocates, people who understand what they've been through. Marco pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. Have I told you lately how proud I am of you? You tell me every day. Good, because I am. Endlessly proud. The wedding arrived in a blur of white flowers and soft music. Emma wore a simple dress, elegant and understated. Marco looked devastating in his tuxedo, his eyes wet with tears as she walked toward him. Giuseppe officiated, telling stories about Isabella and how she'd dreamed of this day for her son. Maria served as Emma's matron of honor. The youth center kids scattered rose petals. It was small and intimate and perfect. I, Marco Santini, take you, Emma Sullivan, to be my wife, Marco said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise to love you through darkness and light, to protect you, to honor you, to be worthy of the faith you've placed in me. You saved my life that night in the diner, and you've been saving me every day since. I am yours, completely and forever." Emma recited her own vows through happy tears, promising to stand by him, to see the good in him always, to build a life of meaning together. When they kissed as husband and wife, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers. Emma felt like she was floating, anchored only by Marco's hands on her waist, his smile against her lips. The reception was a joyful chaos. The youth center kids performed a dance routine. Giuseppe got happily drunk and told increasingly embarrassing stories about young Marco. Maria cried with happiness and fed everyone until they couldn't move. As the sun set and guests began to leave, Marco led Emma to the garden's edge, away from the crowd. "Happy?" he asked, deliriously. "You? More than I ever thought possible." He pulled her close. "Thank you, Emma, for taking a chance on me, for seeing past the reputation and the violence to the man underneath. Thank you for letting me in, for building this beautiful life with me." They swayed together to music drifting from the house. Two people who shouldn't work but somehow did. A mafia boss and a waitress turned nurse. Violence and healing. Darkness and light. "I love you, Mrs. Santini," Marco whispered. "I love you too, Mr. Santini, my impossible, wonderful, complicated man." Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Emma thought about the path that had led her here, from that dying diner to this moment of perfect happiness. It had been terrifying and dangerous and nothing she could have predicted, but she wouldn't change a single moment. "What are you thinking about?" Marco asked, noticing her distant expression. "About poison in a glass. About how one moment of courage changed everything." Marco smiled, understanding perfectly. "Best decision you ever made. Grabbing my wrist that night. Best decision we both made," Emma corrected. "You chose to protect me. To let me in. That took courage too." They stayed in the garden until the last guest left, until Maria shooed them away with instructions to enjoy their honeymoon. A week in Italy, visiting the village where Marco's mother had been born, eating pasta and drinking wine and pretending just for a little while that they were simply two people in love. As they drove away from their home, Emma looked back at the brownstone glowing with warm light. Their home, their future, a life built on the foundation of one whispered warning and the trust that had grown from it. "Ready for our adventure, Mrs. Santini?" Marco asked, squeezing her hand. Emma squeezed back, her ring catching the streetlight. "With you, always." 1 year after their wedding, Emma stood in the pediatric wing of Brooklyn General Hospital, her nursing degree finally complete, working her first day as a registered nurse. She'd specialized in trauma care, working with children who'd witnessed violence, experienced abuse, survived the unthinkable. It was hard work, emotionally draining, but deeply fulfilling. Every child she helped was a small victory against the darkness that had claimed so many lives in Marco's world. Nurse Santini? A young girl, maybe 8, looked up at her with frightened eyes. "Is my mama going to die?" Emma knelt beside the bed, taking the small hand in hers. "The doctors are doing everything they can. But right now, let's focus on making you comfortable, okay? Can you tell me where it hurts?" The girl had been caught in crossfire between rival gangs, her mother critical in surgery. Another innocent victim of the violence that plagued their city. Emma's heart ached as she tended to the child's wounds, knowing this story played out too often. That evening, she came home to find Marco in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. Badly, judging by the smoke coming from the oven. "I think we're ordering takeout," he announced sheepishly. Emma laughed, kissing him as she rescued the burnt chicken. "How was your day?" "Productive. We finalized the deal with the city to expand the youth center. We'll be able to serve 3 times as many kids." He poured them both wine. "How was yours?" Emma told him about the little girl, about the mother fighting for her life, about the senseless violence that had put them both in danger. Marco listened, his expression growing darker. "What gang?" he asked quietly. "Marco, no. You can't fix every—" "What gang, Emma?" She sighed. "The East Side Vipers. But Marco, they've been getting bold lately, pushing into civilian areas, not caring about collateral damage." His jaw tightened. "That needs to stop. What are you going to do?" "Have a conversation. Make it clear that there are rules, lines you don't cross. Innocent people, especially children, are off limits." Emma wanted to protest, wanted to tell him violence wasn't the answer, but she'd lived in his world long enough to understand that sometimes the only language certain people understood was force. "Be careful," she said instead. "Come home to me." Marco cupped her face tenderly. Always. The next week, the East Side Vipers' leadership mysteriously disbanded. Rumor had it they'd received a visit from the Reaper himself, had been given a choice: follow the rules or face annihilation. They chose wisely. The little girl's mother survived. When Emma checked on them a month later, they'd moved to a better neighborhood, into an apartment with affordable rent through one of Marco's legitimate housing programs. The mother had a new job at one of his restaurants, safe work with good pay. "Did you do this?" Emma asked Marco that night. "Do what?" "You know what. The apartment, the job." Marco shrugged. "They needed help. I helped. That's what I do now." Emma studied her husband, seeing the changes a year of marriage had brought. He was still dangerous, still commanded respect and fear in his world, but the shadows in his eyes had lightened. He smiled more readily. He slept through most nights without nightmares. "You're becoming the man your mother wanted you to be," she said softly. "I'm trying. For her, for you, for the kids at the center." He pulled Emma onto his lap. "You know what Giuseppe told me yesterday? He said Isabella would have loved you, that you're exactly what I needed to find my way back to my humanity. I didn't do anything special. You loved me when I didn't deserve it. When I was drowning in guilt and violence, you threw me a lifeline. That's everything, Emma." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. Emma thought about Vincent's attempted assassination, about how one moment of courage had spiraled into this beautiful, complicated life. "Marco," she said suddenly, "what happened to Vincent? You never told me." Marco was quiet for a long moment. "He's alive, in prison upstate, serving 20 years for attempted murder and racketeering." "You didn't kill him?" "I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But you'd already shown me there was another way. A better way." He kissed her forehead. "He's being punished, but he's alive. That has to count for something." Emma's eyes filled with tears. This was the man she'd married. Capable of terrible violence, yes, but also capable of mercy. Of choosing the harder path because it was the right one. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I'm proud of us. Look at what we've built together." Marco gestured around their home. "A real life. A good life. We're making a difference, Emma. One kid at a time. One family at a time. We're fighting the darkness with light." Over the following months, their impact grew. The youth center expanded, offering job training and college prep. Emma's trauma program at the hospital received funding through Marco's foundation, helping hundreds of children heal from violence. Marco continued his work, but with a different focus. Protecting his neighborhood, yes, but also investing in it, building it up, creating opportunities. The violence didn't disappear. It never would, not completely. But Marco's reputation shifted. He was still the Reaper to his enemies, still commanded fear and respect, but to the people of Brooklyn, he became something else. A protector, a patron, a man who used his power to lift others up. One evening, Emma came home to find Marco in the nursery they'd been preparing. They'd found out 2 weeks ago that she was pregnant, and the news had transformed him into an anxious, overprotective, utterly devoted, expectant father. "I've been thinking," he said, holding up 2 paint swatches. "Blue or green for the walls? Marco, we don't even know if it's a boy or girl yet. Then maybe yellow? Something neutral?" He set down the swatches and pulled Emma close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I want everything to be perfect for our baby. It will be. Because they'll have you as a father." "Me? Emma, I'm terrified. What if I mess this up? What if my past—" "Your past is what makes you the perfect father. You know the dangers out there. You know what to protect our child from. But more than that, you know the importance of love, of second chances, of choosing light over darkness." Emma kissed him softly. "Our baby is going to be so loved." Marco's eyes grew wet. "I want to be better. For them. For you. I want to build a world where our child doesn't have to be afraid. Then let's build it together. One day at a time." 9 months later, Isabella Emma Santini came into the world screaming, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. Marco held his daughter with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, whispering promises of protection and love. Emma watched her husband cradle their child and felt something shift in the universe. This was what they'd been building toward. Not just a life together, but a future. A legacy of healing instead of violence. Of love instead of fear. Giuseppe visited the next day, bringing enough food to feed an army. "She's beautiful. Isabella would be so happy. She would be proud of Marco," Emma said, watching her husband rock their daughter. "Of the man he's become." He's proud of himself too, I think. Finally. Giuseppe patted Emma's hand. You saved him, you know. That night in the diner, you saved much more than his life. You saved his soul. As weeks turned to months, Emma watched Marco transform again. He cut back on business, spending more time at home with Isabella. He read her stories, changed diapers without complaint, walked the floors at 2 a.m. when she wouldn't sleep. The feared Mafia boss reduced to putty in his daughter's tiny hands. She smiled at me today, he announced one evening, his face lit up with wonder. A real smile. Probably gas, Emma teased. It was not gas. It was a smile. She loves her papa. Emma laughed, pulling him down for a kiss. Of course she does. Everyone who meets you loves you, once they see past the reputation to the man underneath. Not everyone, just the people who matter. Marco gazed at his wife and daughter with complete adoration. My girls, my whole world. Years later, when Isabella was 5 and asking questions about how Mama and Papa met, Emma would tell her a modified version. A story about courage and kindness, about a woman who saw danger and chose to act, about a man who learned that true strength meant protecting rather than destroying. So, Mama saved Papa? Isabella would ask, her dark eyes wide. Mama and Papa saved each other, Marco would correct, pulling them both close. And they lived happily ever after. It wasn't quite a fairy tale. There were still hard days, still threats to manage, still the weight of Marco's past to carry. But they carried it together, building a life of meaning and purpose from the ashes of what had been. Emma had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing someone despite their flaws, about seeing their potential and helping them reach it. Marco had learned that he didn't have to be defined by his worst moments, that redemption was possible through action and commitment. And together they'd learned that sometimes the most unlikely love stories, the ones that shouldn't work, that defy logic and reason, are the ones that change everything. As Emma stood in their garden one evening, watching Marco push Isabella on the swing while she shrieked with laughter, she thought about poison in a glass and a whispered warning, about how one moment of courage had led to this. A family, a home, a future bright with possibility. Don't swallow, it's poisoned, she'd said. And in saving his life, she'd found her own. The betrayer learned his lesson behind bars, spending his days reflecting on the cost of his greed. The innocent were protected. The guilty were punished. And two people who'd found each other in darkness built a life filled with light. Justice, mercy, and love had won. And that was the greatest victory of all. Thanks so much for reading this story. If you enjoyed Marco and Emma's journey, please hit that like button, subscribe for more emotional stories, and drop a comment telling me which moment touched your heart the most. I'd love to hear from you.